Asif, how much do you know about uh, AI and media automation and any of that stuff?
Not a lot. AI a little bit, but not so much on media animation. So super interested to. I'm releasing a future work that I talked about in our call a few days ago. So
Uh-huh.
excited to see how this changes everything. And
You know what's really interesting about the future of work? I have to put you in touch with a friend of mine, Alex, who's actually working on he's working on an initiative to look at the future of work and how automation and AI's effect on the workspace is going to impact people emotionally, and what people need to do to prepare for that kind of future workforce of tomorrow. Because
sure.
you're already looking at the last 10 years, 15 years, and how technology, while it has it's sort of it's had the intention of bringing us closer together and making us more social, but it in
Mhm.
some ways has actually made us less social, and
Yep.
there's less connection and there's more disconnection as a result of social media
Yep.
and technology, right? I mean, email and text and all those kind of things, Slack permeating into the workforce have actually made it more difficult for people to connect for real in the workspace, right? So
Mhm.
he's looking at what that means once a lot of functions are not only aided by machine learning and AI, but replaced and augmented. So that means that people might be more isolated in the workplace of the future, right? And if we're
Mhm.
talking about the importance of play in humans' everyday life, like the play starts going away more and more, and it actually could have um, a profound impact on people's mental health in the workspace,
Yeah.
which is it's kind of scary. So he's creating a consultancy. I'll put you in touch with him if you're interested in
Yeah. Definitely.
work.
Cool.
Um, I think the interesting thing with this entire topic, and I've just noticed this through my career in digital marketing, is that technology is moving. Technology and innovation in technology is moving a lot faster than our ability to conceive how it could actually come to fruition in the world that we've built for ourselves. So, what do I mean by that? I mean, 15 years ago, during the sort of dawn of digital advertising, when digital advertising was seen as a very small piece of the overall marketing mix, and brands were spending maybe 10%, 10% of their overall marketing budget on digital. And this was in the day when, a website for a brand cost $1 million, and banner ads were like simple GIFs, and everything was like really expensive to do, and didn't perform very well, and didn't have a lot of metrics behind it, and you didn't have a lot of understanding behind it. During that time, everyone was predicting that television was going to be dead within like 10 years, and that digital advertising was going to kind of like take over. It's like that vantage point, that's the prediction. No one, I mean, maybe a few people did, but not very many people anticipated that TV as a medium was just going to like evolve. What is TV now? I mean, if you're distinguishing it between over the airwaves versus over digital, who cares, right? Like, you have a TV in your home and you can now stream things. And outside of sports and major world events, people care very little whether it's live or a little delayed video on demand. So it's anyway, it'll be interesting. So I see that we've got a decent group of people here. I'm sure a great group of people, but a decent group of people number-wise. So I'm going to get started. Um, so who am I? My name is Anthony Demikin. I am, well, first and foremost, I'm a classically trained musician. That was the first part of my life. And in the last 15 years, I was digital marketing executive working with companies like P&G and Nintendo and Pfizer. And in the last 7 years of my career, have taken my music background and my digital marketing background and combined them together to do more music licensing and marketing work for brands like Coca-Cola and American Express. I currently own a music production company called Ear Candy Shop. It's a high-end production studio. My business partner Philip is a Grammy-nominated composer, and most of what we do is very high-end, bespoke music production and scoring work for advertising, television, and film. In the last year and a half, we've incubated the sort of automated, technology-driven version of our current production business, using automation and machine learning to automate parts of the music production process. And so I've spent the past couple of years studying what automation and machine learning can do for the creative media and creative storytelling industry. We're developing a product with PhDs in machine learning right now, and looking at which parts of the creative process we can automate and which parts of the creative process we should leave alone. And that is kind of happening in every vertical of the sort of creative storytelling and media industry. And so that's what I'll be talking about today. So I'm going to oversimplify machine learning very quickly. I don't know, how familiar the group is with how machine learning works. And to be perfectly honest, I'm by no means a technical expert in machine learning, but at a very, very high level, the two functions that industry can take advantage of is pattern recognition at scale and automation at scale, right? So the basics are you can have a machine learning model ingest a bunch of input, whatever that is, media, video, audio, large data sets, whether it's consumer behavior data or any kind of data, and seek out patterns. Some of these patterns the human brain can assess as well. Oh, I see, I'm going to look at 1,000 images and I see there's a red hat over here and a red hat over there. That's something that we can understand. But there are other pattern recognitions that machine learning algorithms can do at a very large scale that goes beyond the comprehension of the human brain. It's patterns that will not make any sense to us. And so machine learning models will create their own language for identifying and analyzing these patterns and making them actionable, especially when you're talking about data at scale, very, very large data sets, something inconceivable by a single human brain. And out of these patterns, you can create, create automation processes that will perform one function or another, whatever the business is trying to do. So we'll talk about that in the context of media production and creative storytelling. So we're talking about data input and process and execution, right? Let me learn something, and then let me figure out how to do something with that knowledge and the patterns that I've identified. So storytelling media, we can talk about a lot of different storytelling media, but I'm going to focus on a kind of the 6 aspects of the 6 aspects of television, film, branded content. Video is sort of eating the internet these days, and in the next couple of years, it's going to make up about 80% of internet traffic. So most video production, regardless of what it's being made for, whether it's film, TV, even YouTubers that create content, they follow basically a similar process. There's writing and editing, and this also pertains to journalism and news content. There's photography and film. There's image and film editing and processing. There's the actual performance, and we'll use that term, we'll make it all encompassing. So even an anchor standing in front of a camera is sort of like a human performance, if you will. Music and audio and sound production and editing, and then the distribution of the content, right? So those are basically the big functions of any kind of creative storytelling. And even if there isn't an audio visual component, obviously when you're talking about the written word, print journalism, or blogging, or anything that's just writing, this obviously writing is a component as well. So we're kind of encapsulating most storytelling with these 6 buckets. So today, AI and automation is being used, and it has been used in the last probably 5+ years to basically assist creative storytellers and producers of media. And tomorrow, and what's the time frame for tomorrow? I think tomorrow is probably 5 to 10+ years at least. But tomorrow, in the not so distant future, within our lifetime, machine learning will be capable of unsupervised automation and creation of storytelling content of various types of media. So, let's talk about writing first, right? The most practical example that we've already adopted, most of us, in everyday life is Gmail's auto-compose function. It came out of nowhere, and everyone, I don't know what other people's experience was, but mine was, this is very weird. I did not ask for this. But then after you see it in action a few times, you're like, well, this isn't going to replace my email writing abilities, but it sure is handy. So why not use it? If we were writing a dystopian novel, this would be like the gateway drug for robots taking over our planet, right? Like, it works. It's very helpful. It's not super intrusive. It doesn't necessarily replace us, but it is assisting, right? Now, in the past couple of years, brands and advertising is obviously my background, so near and dear to my heart. Brands have jumped on the trend of using AI sort of in a stunty way to create some scripts for commercials. And I don't know if you've seen any of this work. Lexus did a spot that was written by AI, and Burger King did some voiceover scripts that were written by AI. It's very weird and dystopian and sort of gibberish and nonsensical, and that was the whole point. They wanted you to know that this was an AI generated ad, and part of the creative idea there, part of the fun, was that it didn't make any sense. If you haven't seen the Burger King work, it's hilarious. I highly recommend that you look it up. It's very funny and very well done. But it's by no means replacing, creative copywriters at advertising agencies, because it didn't really make any sense. It didn't connect with an audience emotionally. The story was, here's a terribly written script that AI did without any human assistance. This is also kind of penetrating the film world, but in a very similar way. There's a film called Sunspring, which I think was partially or almost all written by AI. And you see, I pulled the headline here that most of it was gibberish and it didn't make sense, but the actors stuck to the script and decided to act it out as is. And it creates kind of this, this is weird, it doesn't make any sense, but they're doing it, and it is a piece of film that you can watch, so it's kind of cool. But again, it's not necessarily replacing script writers in Hollywood by any means. But these are kind of the early days of this technology. So with photography and film, image augmentation is kind of one of the easiest and most straightforward parts of the photography and film process that you can apply machine learning to, because digital images exist already, and they exist in large data sets that you can analyze. And so kind of if we call everything that's digital in the box and everything that's in the physical space out of the box, the in the box stuff is a lot easier to analyze and process and augment. So if you're talking about digital photography, yeah, we can have a machine learning algorithm look at hundreds of thousands or millions of images and extrapolate a variety of different patterns, whether it's recognizing facial expressions or recognizing a style. So this is a example from a company called, one second, take a look here. I want to give credit where credit is due. This company is called, this is the Deep Dream generator. And, you know, you see a few examples here of where they're taking a piece of photography and they're taking an illustration style, which has also been digitized, and they're combining the two, right? Obviously, like photo filters kind of use some of this technology as well. So you can augment some of these images, but where AI and automation is a little limited right now is, you know, out of the box in the real world. If you wanted to automate photography and filming in the physical world, out in nature on a set, you know, if you wanted to fully automate the production of the Planet Earth documentary, you would need really sophisticated robotics to do that, right? And you would need someone to build those robotics, very expensive, someone to supervise those robotics. You know, how does a robot get out to Antarctica and go and shoot a piece of film? So why I'm bringing this up is because in creative media and storytelling, you will see that there are a lot of functions that can be replaced if it's all digital end to end. But obviously the inputs for those, you know, like taking a picture of an individual, it's harder to automate that digitally, and you need a lot of hardware if you wanted to automate that. And so when we're talking about creative storytelling in film, that becomes really difficult. So, but image augmentation for sure is kind of low-hanging fruit in the photography and film category. The other thing in photography and film that you're starting to see pop up is the generation of you know, characters and avatars that look like humans. So this is, so what is this company called? Well, I do not know. But this is a company that is basically creating AI-generated faces to be used as royalty-free models, right? And this is essentially it's what's called generative media creation, right? So an algorithm will look at a bunch of real faces and understand facial composition, and then it'll start creating images of faces of its own. So these these faces are created using, you know, analyzed features from, let's say, hundreds of thousands or millions of real people, but none of these people are real people. And you know, when you're talking about the business side of this and why these companies are popping up first before everything else, well, that's because one of the barriers in the media industry is copyright and you know, image likeness and things of that nature. So if you you know, if you wanted to use a model in a commercial or in a piece of commercial media, like a TV show or something like that, but most of this stuff is not for TV shows. It's I think for brands and, you know, customer service and those kind of things. But if you wanted to use somebody's face, you couldn't do it indefinitely. You know, you'd need to have a contract in place with that person because you're using their name and likeness. And that goes back to copyright laws that are very old and outdated. And so being able to generate a face that doesn't have a person behind it would allow you to use that character, that face, without any limits indefinitely, right, in the digital space. So that could be your customer service face forever, and you'd only have to pay for it once. So let's talk about image and film editing. With image editing, film editing, and also audio editing, which we'll talk about a little later, AI and machine learning have already been incorporated into a lot of the software that people use today. So video editing, photography editing software, and audio and sound editing software, they've been slowly but surely incorporating add-on tools that will augment some of the editing process, you know, just make things a little easier. So today, For film editing, for example, that technology is being used to transcribe speech to text, which you used to have to do manually. It extracts keywords from transcripts. It can recognize images and return certain keywords. It can identify faces and identify instances of the same face, and it can recognize emotion. These last 2 points, why are they important? Well, identifying facial expressions and linking the same face in a piece of video, and also recognizing emotion, is very helpful in logging footage. When you're filming a TV show or a film, you're shooting hundreds or thousands of hours of footage, and then usually someone has to go and log all of that, so that when an editor starts editing thousands of hours down to a 2-hour movie, they know what they have at their disposal and how they can bring that story to life through the variety of different shots and angles that they have. So that used to be, and still is, a very kind of painstaking, laborious process for people to do, and it's not very accurate, and people miss things. And so the ability to automate that really helps an editor have everything at their disposal and be able to even do keyword searches where they say, okay, well, I'm editing a particular scene in the screenplay, and I have the actor from shot from the left side. Do I have him shot from the right side? Right. So it's going to go and find that actor's face in that scene, and instead of like going through a bunch of different footage, it'll just find it automatically. So in the future, all of those tasks are just going to get better and better and better, right? So I think that the people who are making the software for media creative storytelling professionals are incorporating this technology little by little into the existing software already. So it's just like the Gmail, the sort of Gmail autocomplete. Slowly but surely, software you're already using is starting to have functionality that's making it easier and easier for you to do your job. Is the eventuality that video editing at some point in the future is going to be just you uploading all of the footage that you shot and clicking like generate movie, and it just gives you, a beautiful edit all done without you having to do anything else? Potentially. And then, I don't really know how that's going to change the workforce, the sort of the video production workforce, but that is an eventuality that is plausible, right? And if you think about analyzing other data, an algorithm could very easily look at a lot of different movies, look at all the Oscar-winning movies, look at the composition of the script, the shots that it uses, and the way that it stitches the edit together, and try to emulate that using a different screenplay, to make a new movie and a different set of shot footage. So it is within the realm of possibility to automate the entire process. Performance is kind of is a bit of a creepy one right now, but surprisingly effective. So this is a company called Hour1 that my friend Natalie, who's here, is working with. And they create AI characters. And these characters, just like the previous example, have their own face and look. And as far as I understand, they can be, dressed and styled and created in a way that resonates with a particular audience and is, approachable to a particular audience versus another audience. And that virtual actor can basically say and do anything you want them to. And again, the business case for this is obviously you're not paying actors all the time, and not only that, you have a consistent voice and face that doesn't eat, doesn't sleep, can be available to multiple people at the same time at all hours of the night around the world, and have individual conversations. And it could very well be a part of a brand's visual identity now, an actual person. Whereas before it used to be a spokesperson. Well, now you could actually have like It's like something in between a spokesperson and a logo is this, right? And on the kind of copyright side of things, it also allows you to, you know, avoid the issues of these kind of actor and model contracts, which is why, you know, you always see people have different actors and models in their commercials and different spokespeople, because at the end of the day, if you want to keep using the same person, it gets progressively more and more expensive. Like Subway's Jared, for example, you know, year one, who the hell knew who Jared was? No one really gave a crap about Jared. It was just some guy in a Subway commercial. But after 10 years of seeing Subway and Jared, well, now Jared is kind of like synonymous with Subway. So Jared is getting paid a lot more as an actor 10 years down the line, because the brand has built some equity in Jared, you know, and so in the eyes of the consumer, there's some value there. And so he has negotiating power. An AI performer does not have any negotiating power, and you own it outright. So if you want to take the sort of the commerce approach for it, there's a really clear business case for why this would make sense for a brand. Down the line, could these things also replace actors in you know, videos, movies? Absolutely, and probably already happening to some extent. Okay, so music production, right? So just like with video production, you know, the assisting part is already happening. There's software plugins, audio processing software plugins that use AI to emulate different sounds, to do various audio processing. So if you're playing one guitar and you want it to sound like a different guitar, there's actually tools that use AI, and they will look at, you know, the data set there is they're looking at a bunch of audio waves of different guitar sounds, and then they're trying to recreate that. So you play $100 guitar, and this thing processes that audio input to emulate a $20,000 guitar, right? But today there's a lot of activity in the sort of generative AI music space, right? So there's music projects like OpenAI, like Amper, other companies like JukeDeck, and my company, LibraryX, which are working on actually creating music from scratch, using, you know, a combination of existing audio elements or net new audio elements. So, you know, the one shameless plug in this talk that I will give is that there's a lot of projects that use generative AI, where an algorithm is looking at existing music and it's learning music rules and composition rules based on an existing set of music, okay? And then it is using software instruments to create its own versions of music that sort of emulates that. And there's, if you look up music AI, there's been a lot of experiments, especially with classical music, where an AI algorithm would learn a bunch of Bach concertos and then compose its own new Bach concerto. The limitations of that are twofold if you're talking about monetizing a platform like this. One is there's a pretty high risk of copyright infringement if the AI accidentally uses some of the source material, you know, or emulates a particular melody. Because when you're talking about music copyright law, melodies are copywritten, and, you know, if you have a human listening to every single piece of music that the AI is generating to make sure it's not infringing on someone's copyright, then you don't have, you kind of miss out on the benefit of scaling, right? If someone has to listen to it, then what's the point of automating it? You know, you're not going to be able to generate like hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of pieces of music if you have to have a human listen to every single one, make sure it's not ripping off a pre-existing piece of music. The other point is, you know, just like with film, just like with AI not being able to go out and shoot in the woods because it doesn't have hands to hold a camera, with music, obviously you can create digital music, just like you can synthesize digital images, right? Like the AI characters that we showed, they're synthesizing a virtual face, right? Using pixels essentially. You can do that with music too, but the issue is um, digital music, the way that it sounds, is still not 100% comparable to how a human performance sounds. So you can emulate a Stradivarius violin and someone playing it, but it's not going to sound, and more importantly, it's not going to feel the same way that an actual recording of that is going to feel. Why? I don't really know, actually. I think there's some kind of X factor that happens when a person is pouring their emotions out through their instrument. But I'm also biased. I've been playing music my whole life, so maybe I over romanticize this whole thing. But there is something, when you're hearing a live instrument, a live human performance, there's something that happens in between the notes. People are kind of like speaking through their instrument. And that is really hard to emulate digitally at the present moment. Who's to say that in 10 years we won't figure out how to do that too? But for now, you can clearly tell the difference between digitally derived music and something that's being played live and recorded. So distribution is sort of the last one, and I'm not going to talk too much about this one because it's not really part of the creative process. It's just a way of delivering the creative output to the world. But anybody that works in marketing or advertising probably knows that there's something called programmatic advertising, and a lot of it's just automated, right? You're basically you're delivering personalized information and personalized advertising to different people based on data that you have about them, where they are, what their behaviors are on the internet, what kind of things they're interested in. And similarly, now there's machine learning that's being incorporated into that process to be able to use a lot of personalized data and consumer data to be able to extrapolate patterns for what kind of content people react to, because obviously advertising wants to convert views into sales, for example, or some kind of brand engagement. So the whole thing is optimized for you to be engaged with the content and potentially take an action, whether that's buying something or clicking through to read more about a product or service, etc. So very similar concepts are used in the distribution of creative media, because anytime you're going to release a film, a television show, or a piece of content on the web, you're going to want to get eyeballs on it. And in the digital space, you're going to do that one of two ways. You're either going to use paid advertising, or you're going to use organic methods of promotion like social media and virality, if you can figure out how to make a piece of content go viral. So there are already kind of AI processes in place for doing that, and they're only going to get better and better as these technologies have access to more and more of our data, right? Because the AI gets better and better the more it understands and knows about us. And obviously there's a huge privacy conversation to be had about that. On the one hand, you're giving up a lot of privacy in exchange for things sort of working better and being more personalized, but obviously that's a slippery slope and not a conversation that we want to get into during this talk. So, but the other piece that automation and machine learning can really help with in terms of creative content distribution is localization and personalization. So this is already being done to some extent with analyzing voiceover and creating subtitles on the fly, translating those subtitles, localizing a Netflix show across 20 countries, for example. There's machine learning elements to that process. And also in the future, you'll be able to actually personalize some of this creative media. So Netflix is already launching shows that allow you to sort of choose your own adventure. you're kind of clicking for one thing or another thing to happen. But it's very likely that in the future we'll also be able to create shows that basically change the way that they're edited, and films that change the way that they're edited based on who's watching them, right? Like if you, quite frankly, like right now, this kind of a very lo-fi method, but it's an example. If you are censoring a particular film because it is not in line with, let's say, the culture of a particular country, right? Like they're going to create an alternate edit. Well, you can also do that in an automated way and have basically a bunch of people watch 100 versions of the same film and do it automatically. So that's sort of, those are like the 6 buckets of creative storytelling. And we're at about, we've got about 20 minutes left. So I just want to give some key takeaways. Was this a 30-minute session? Everybody's laughing. And no one said anything? Come on, guys.
We're letting you finish.
Come on. If it's a 30, I'm definitely working on an hour session type of. Clearly.
We can have a joint session.
I see everybody smiling, and I'm like, what? Nothing that I'm saying is that funny. It's actually, it could be quite scary for people.
We're going to see how far you're going to go before someone says, stop.
Well, you guys, I mean, come on. Maria, you're right there.
I don't want to say anything,
and what you were saying was so interesting, and I feel like you have more relevant knowledge, so we can share.
Okay, I'm gonna wrap up in 5 minutes. Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm sorry. Then I owe you 15 minutes back. I would say I owe you a drink, but that's like 2022. Can't get you. I'll order you a cocktail to be delivered to your home. All right. Well, basically, look, the key takeaways for what I'm saying is, I think in the short term, all the low-hanging fruit is the stuff that gets the R&D dollars first. So, like I was saying, people don't want to pay for models, for example, or people don't want to pay for VO actors. So they're going to invest in creating technology that replaces those things. So some functions are being automated faster than others. And copyright restrictions are actually an area where a lot of automation work is concentrating on, because those things have monetary impact on production budgets in a very big way. As far as creative production, in the box is a lot easier than out of the box, like I was saying. If it's digital media being created out of nowhere generatively, that's a lot easier to do than if you're trying to automate parts of the process that have to be done in the physical world. Initial human input, the better that is, the better the creative output ends up being, whether that's visual or audio or anything else, or scripts. Most processes still today require a fair amount of human refinement and curation. But current solutions are more about assisting than replacing for now. And I think curation over time will play a very critical role. And some of it will be done by the viewers themselves, because data is being collected on how people are interacting with these technologies and being used to refine those technologies. And impact on jobs is something that everybody's talking about when it comes to automation and any kind of industry. So this is kind of my personal sort of gut check. But like I said, 10 years ago, when digital advertising was coming up, everyone thought TV was going to die. It did not. It just morphed into some whole other thing. So I don't know. I could be very much wrong. But from my vantage point, low-cost, high-volume functions are the ones that are being disrupted first. So the gigging economy in the creative media industry, like extras, for example, are already losing a lot of jobs, because CGI can sort of take a group of 10 people and copy and paste them to fill an entire stadium. So sort of things like that, voice actors, people who make background music, for example. I mean, our business is in part replacing people who compose and produce that music, but where we're making up for it is we're investing in the performance. We're paying performers and musicians to create the elements that we're using to create new music. But in the long term, the impact on jobs is going to be pretty staggering. And long term, I think, is 5, 10, 15 plus years. Roles of creatives and producers are going to shift. They're going to be more, right now it's AI assisting us. I think in the future, it's going to be us assisting the AI and pointing it in the right direction so that it can have an emotional impact on the viewer. Knowledge exchange between creatives, developers, and data scientists. I see this as a big bottleneck to this industry moving, as fast as people expect it to. So there's a barrier. There's a communication barrier between data scientists, creatives, and developers right now. And the less that barrier exists, the faster this innovation will happen. And digital media production workforce will experience drastic changes. So if you were in the last 10 years, like, it was a really good idea to become a video editor because video is everywhere. But if video editing is automated, if an algorithm can read all the source footage and understand what it needs to do with it without you, suddenly there's almost no need for a video editor. And it went from like a very secure job to a not very secure job in the span of 20 years, right? So the rate at which jobs are becoming obsolete as technology propels forward is getting shorter and shorter. Okay, that's all I have. And I'm sorry that I didn't realize this was 30 minutes and not an hour. Maria, I love you.
It's very interesting.
I feel like
I could hear more.
I feel like if anybody has questions, they should just talk to me later.